Welcome, hello, and welcome again to our second program of our Mental Health Month. Thank you for joining us again. Please say hi. As we mentioned before, let us know where you're joining from. It will be nice to know where everyone is joining us from. Like I said yesterday, I'm in Armenia, and our guest speaker, Dr. Sam Davis, is joining us from Spain. Yesterday's presentation was like a warm-up. We talked about different mental health issues that Dr. Sam has himself encountered and some tips on keeping the mind healthy. So if you haven't watched our previous presentation, I encourage you to watch that one as well. We're very grateful for the time Dr. Sam has agreed to dedicate to us. Please type your questions in the chat box on YouTube, as we will have a Q&A segment again at the end of the presentation, where Dr. Sam Davis will answer your health questions. We want to welcome Pastor Sam back on our program. Thank you for being with us again, Pastor Sam.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Delighted to be here with you, Sosie.
Thank you very much. So let's start with a word of prayer.
Sure, let's pray. We just want to give you thanks, Father, that we can come together this afternoon. We want to thank you that there are people joining us from around the world, and we invite your presence to be here with us. We ask that you will lead us and guide us. And Father, as we speak together, may your will for everyone and their health be done. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so everyone, good afternoon. And as we begin, I will just begin with a disclaimer to say that whatever we say here is really just for educational purposes. And if you want to, if you've got a problem with mental health, then you really ought to see your mental health professional. This is for education. PPE for mind health. You know, the term PPE has become popularized recently through the coronavirus crisis, when that term just jumped out at us: personal protection equipment. And people were talking really about protecting themselves from the coronavirus. But today I want to speak about protecting yourself, your mental health. You know, how do we go about that? PPE for mind health. Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 to 7. The Apostle Paul writes, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind in Christ Jesus." And that's a wonderful statement there for mind health. The Apostle Paul says, be anxious for nothing. And you know, anxiety leads to depression. And so the Apostle Paul is saying, let us not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will take care of you. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22 tells us, a merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. You know, and the bones are so vital to our health because it is the marrow that produces produces good blood. And so, you know, the health of our bones, the health of our body, the health of our mind is so, so important to our well-being. So every day, stand guard at the gate of your mind. And yesterday I was saying is that we don't wake up in the morning and say to ourselves, "Well, today I'm going to look after my brain health." Maybe if you're in a work environment that's really toxic, then I have heard people say, "Well, I've got to look after my mental health." Maybe you're in a home environment where you've got to say, I need to look after my mental health. But I have heard people say Christians should not suffer from mental health challenges based on the foregoing text. Be anxious for nothing, because the peace of God is going to take care of you. A merry heart does good like medicine. And so there are those who have the view that Christians should not suffer from mental health. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And that's the utopia. That's the ideal position, that the peace of God will take care of you. But the reality is somewhat different, when we're in the cut and thrust of daily life. And I just want to, as we begin this presentation about mind health and protecting your mind health, just share with you some of the Bible characters that did go through depression and anxiety. Elijah, 1 Kings 19 and verse 4, "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am not better than my ancestors." And so Elijah has had this wonderful mountaintop experience. He has defeated the prophets of Baal. And then he gets this WhatsApp message from Jezebel: "Tomorrow about this time, you will be as dead as the men that you have killed." And Elijah just goes into a depressive mode. He is afraid, and he begins to run for his life. And this is a man who's been up in the mountaintop. And then what about John the Baptist? And I shared this with you yesterday. John the Baptist is in prison, and his disciples are coming to him, and they're saying, "Well, don't worry, John, your water walking cousin's going to get you out of this." And as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, John gets depressed because his disciples are coming to him and saying, "Well, what's happening? What's he done?" And eventually John sends a message to Jesus: "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect another?" John begins to doubt because he's in that depressive kind of mindset. And then what about Jonah? "Now, O Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. I don't want to live anymore. Life is too bad," And really, of all the guys that we've talked about, Jonah didn't have anything to be depressed about. He's preached and he's had this wonderful conversion. A whole city have changed their behavior because of his preaching. And Jonah gets depressed because he expected that God would follow through on what he said and destroy them. And then Job chapter 3 and verse 11, Job, we all know about Job's situation. Job went through a situation where he's lost 10 kids, and it's funny because the human body reaches a place where it cannot absorb any more pain, and it just shuts down. And Job comes to that place where he says, "Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from my mother's womb? I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil." And then one that I've not written is well, maybe I have. Jeremiah says, "Curse the day I was born. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow to the end of my days in shame?" I can't remember if it was Jeremiah or David said, "Well, cursed be the man who brought the message that I was born." That's true depression. So you can see that these men of God, forgive me, I've just got flies here that's bothering me. But you can see that the very notion that because we have a relationship with God, we shouldn't get depressed, we shouldn't get anxious or anything like that. That's really not quite true. During the recent coronavirus pandemic, the worst global public health crisis in recent history, and certainly in my lifetime, it caused unprecedented medical, social, economic upheavals across the globe and inflicted profound psychological pain on many individuals. Just the fact that people were isolated from family, isolated from friends, couldn't go out in public as they wanted to. It really did take a massive toll on people's mental health. Dr. Lorna M. Bream, Medical Director of the Emergency Department of New York, noticed her position, Presbyterian Allen Hospital, died in Charlottesville, Virginia, where she was staying with family, her father said in an interview. The victim was taken to VA hospital for treatment, but later succumbed to self-inflicted injuries, Breen's father, Dr. Philip C. Breen, said. She had described devastating scenes at the toll the coronavirus took on patients. She tried to do her job and it killed her, he said. So here's a young woman, Dr. Lorna Bream, medical director for the emergency department in a New York hospital. And at the beginning, at the height of the pandemic, when she saw the amount of people that was dying of the coronavirus, this took a toll on her mental health. And let me be clear, she was also a Christian. She's working in a Christian hospital. She is a Christian, but it became too much. I remember during the coronavirus time, I went to visit my daughter in the UK, and we were driving in the city center one day, and we came to the car park, and she said, I came here during this week, Dad, and it was all cordoned off because we had a jumper. Someone had jumped from the top of the car park building, and we could only assume that because of the coronavirus pandemic, where people were locked in their houses, were not able to have the normal social interaction that they were used to, this was just one of the consequences. So previous epidemiological studies of similar outbreaks supported evidence of mental toll and increased suicide risks that should be monitored and adequate resources made available to address the mental health challenges and related long-term ramifications. So let's all be clear that because of what we've been through, whether you're Christian or non-Christian, because of what we've been through, there will be long-term ramifications. Notice the Bible tells us that we are living in a time just moving away from the coronavirus situation, men's hearts failing them for fear and looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So people are not just worried about the pandemic, which we hope the worst of it is behind us, but there's climate change. There is the war in the Ukraine, which has had a knock-on effect because we are seeing, the Ukraine was one of the great providers of fertilizer. It was a great provider for grain and wheat around the world. And now those things are not taking place. And so we've seen Sri Lanka erupt. And there are other countries that are suffering. We are suffering from high petrol prices, high gas prices. So all of these things are coming together, and it's having a toll on people's mental health, because some folk are saying, well, we cannot pay these high bills. What's the government going to do for us? How are we going to cope? So men's hearts failing them for fear, and fear leads to anxiety. Fear leads to stress. Fear and anxiety and stress suppresses the immune system, which then leads to the onset of disease. And so it's so important that we guard our mind health in spite of the external circumstances. Jesus was very aware that we can get caught up in the externals. And he says, therefore, I say to you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor yet for your body, what you shall put on. Is not the life more than meat and the body more than raiment? And so Jesus admonishes us to protect our mind, to make sure that you're taking PPE for the mind. Do not be anxious. Don't borrow tomorrow's problems for today, because we have enough to deal with for today. Allow tomorrow to take care of itself. And, I think there are good principles there for us. Take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or drink. And we may say, well, that's easier said than done, especially when we see high petrol prices, high fuel prices for heating our homes, etc., etc. The Bible tells us that men's hearts are failing them for fear. A study of older people who were cocooned during the COVID-19 pandemic has found that almost 40% reported worse mental health, while more than 40% said there had been a decline in their physical health. And of the 150 people surveyed, almost 3 out of 4 said they were exercising less frequently or not at all. And so here's the issue. Physical exercise is so important to our mental health. And during the pandemic, people were being forbidden to come out of their homes or to stray too far from their homes. And then, of course, there were folk who were afraid of coming out because they felt that if they stayed indoors, they would be cocooned or isolated from this pestilence. And so exercise went down. And when you're not exercising, then it does have a detrimental effect on your mental health. Experts said that the damage to children's mental health could last for years. And so we saw that the pandemic did not just affect adults, but children also were affected. And at present, only vulnerable children at the time were allowed to go to school. And then we heard about intimate partner violence. And this is one of the things, as we went into the pandemic, people were very, very concerned that abusers would then increase the level of abuse because then they were isolated with their partner. And so what was bad became a lot worse under COVID-19. And of course, if you're living in that environment, then it's going to have a toll on your mental health. And notice the drink on the table. People were drinking more, and then obviously it had an impact on family life. Frontline workers were very worried and stressed out about the potential of contracting the disease, concerned about passing it on to their families, stress of seeing so many people die. We saw Lorna Breen, who could no longer take it and took her own life. The stress of families separated from dying loved ones. And that was one of the worst things about the pandemic. There's a family member who is in hospital. My pastor here in Almeria died of the coronavirus probably just about 2 years ago. And his wife and children were not able to go through and see him. How terrible is that? And so he recorded a video of himself in the hospital speaking to his children, and that was his last message to them. So stress can lead to anxiety and depression, and whatever disease that you may have, whatever illness you may have, studies have shown that depression exacerbates or worsens the condition. Remember that a healthy mind is like medicine. So nurses and physicians are affected by a variety of stressors in their workplace, because of their responsibility to provide health and treatment to patients. The National Institute of Health said that after studying the relative prevalence of health disorders in high stress occupations, out of 130 jobs surveyed, nursing ranked 27th due to mental health problems. And so we can understand that during the pandemic, our nurses were on the front line. Other studies report that 7.4% of nurses were absent from work. And these are statistics for the UK, but no doubt, I don't know how badly Australia was affected, but I know that you had some serious lockdown there in Australia. So let's just look at some of the key drivers. Fear from loss of income. So, people, men's hearts failing them for fear, people being anxious, were concerned about the loss of income, business failure, bills and commitments. So, people, am I going to have a job at the end of this pandemic? Is my business going to survive? Can we afford to pay the bills? And so worry, anxiety, stress, all of these things were having a toll. And then, it was just not in major cities, but around the world. And none of us are immune to mental health challenges. Let's be clear. We've seen some biblical examples of great men of God, John the Baptist and Elijah, the Jeremiah, who had their mental health challenges as a result of what they were going through. And so, other factors leading to anxiety and depression, the death of a loved one. My wife and I, just 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, we experienced the loss of our son. He was healthy, just had a very brief illness. We thought it was just a flu. He would come through from that, but died sadly. And so that really does take a toll because you go into grieving. And let me just say, grief is an involuntary response. Okay, grief is an involuntary response. We don't volunteer to grieve. We grieve because we have experienced loss. So loss of employment. And I shared yesterday that I was out of work for just 3 days and became depressed. And, just think about people who are out of work for months or even years, and what that can do to their mental health. You may get the diagnosis of a terminal illness. And a friend of mine was telling me that his wife had a work colleague going about her daily daily routine. Everything was well. And then she had a diagnosis for cancer, breast cancer. And within 2 weeks, she was dead. Within 2 weeks, that woman was dead. Not necessarily because of the cancer, but because of what happened in her head once she got that diagnosis. The will to fight, the will to overcome the disease was just not there. And that's what happened as a consequence. And then relationship breakup, divorce. This is one of the greatest stressors in life. And I've seen people who've come down with cancer as a result of a marital breakup. And this has terrible, terrible impact on one's mental health. I'm working with somebody right now who has gone through a divorce and has not just lost her husband, but her children have also turned against her. And that is really having a great toll on her mental health. And then what about the betrayal by a partner? Again, here is something that is involuntary. The response that you give when something like that happens, it's not that you're choosing to grieve, it's not that you're choosing to go into depression, but this is something that really hits you. And all of these factors have an impact on our mental health. And then here is real threat of eviction from your home. during the pandemic, one of the things that the British government did was to change the law so that landlords could not evict their tenants during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was to protect tenants. So we are reminded every day, stand guard at the gate of your mind. It's just a reminder to us that our mind health is so important to every aspect of our physical health and well-being. So the mind and the brain is not in isolation to the rest of the body. There is a symbiotic working relationship between body and mind. And if you've got a sick mind, you're going to have a sick body, sick mind. Okay, so we're all aware of this statement. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and the secret of good brain health is also through the stomach. It's not through Discam or the pharmacy. The secret to good brain health is also through the stomach. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said all diseases begin in the stomach. And recent studies have shown Hippocrates to be bang on in his statement, all disease begins in the stomach. Ellen White tells us that 90% of all disease begins in the mind. Okay, and so that was really the topic of my dissertation, looking at Hippocrates' statement that all disease begins in the stomach, and comparing that against what Ellen White had to say, that 90% of all disease begins in the mind. And when you think about it, 90% of the disease begins in the mind, because it is the mind that causes you to make that decision to put things in your mouth that goes to the stomach. So there was a symbiosis between Ellen White and Hippocrates, because at the end of the day, what you put in the stomach does lead to disease, but here it's taking place from here. That's where it begins. And so 2/3 of the body's immune system lies in the gut. In many ways, your gut bacteria are as vast and as mysterious as the Milky Way. About 100 trillion bacteria, both good and bad, live inside your digestive system. Collectively, they are known as the gut microbiota. So the stomach has been described as the second brain. So the GI tract and the brain actually come from the same part of the developing baby or embryo. And as a result, the digestive tract and brain have many similar nerve endings and chemicals that relay signals and messages. The brain and the gut are connected. And so says Dr. W.B. Scott. And he has written a book, Irritable Brain Syndrome, The Mind and the Body Gut-Brain Connection. So there is a symbiosis with the mind and the gut. We do well to be aware of that. It is now known that the benefits of human microbe symbiosis can be extended to human mental health. And in recent years, evidence has shown that the gut-brain axis, or the bidirectional communication between the resident microbes of the GI tract and the brain, plays a key role in maintaining brain health. And so it's so important, those gut microbiome. If you have good microbiome, which comes through choice, then that will feed into good brain health. So there is one big visceral nerve embedded in your gut, that's the vagus nerve, and researchers revealed that up to 90% of its fibers carry information from the gut to the brain rather than the other way around. So in other words, the brain interprets gut signals as emotions. So you really should trust your gut. So, the gut microbiota has an influence on brain neurotransmitters, which can affect our moods, cause stress and anxiety. The brain also communicates with the gut microbiome. Hormones from the pineal gland that affect our moods can also have an impact upon our ability to get a good night's sleep. The intestinal microbiome produces many of the neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, and GABA. It is not an underestimation, therefore, to say that the intestinal microbiome and the gut brain axis are crucial to our health. So there is another person repeating the same information that the gut microbiome and the health of the brain is really so important, and we can control what goes into our bodies. Alana Collins has written a book, and 90% Human, and she says with the microbiota making up over 90% of the cells in our bodies, we are in fact more bacteria than human. Writing of her own health challenges, she says just how powerful a role these microbes play, not just in our physical well being, but also in our mental health. My own health troubles were the tip of the iceberg. I learned the emerging scientific evidence that disruptions to the body's microbes were behind gastrointestinal disorders, allergies, autoimmune diseases, and even obesity. And it wasn't just physical health that could be affected, but mental health as well, from anxiety and depression to obsessive compulsive disorder and autism. That's from Collins' book, 10% Human. So, very often we talk about butterflies in the stomach, but an emotional response. We're advised when you're hungry and you can't eat. Again, this is an emotional response which is affecting your bodily function. In fact, we are advised if you're upset, if you're angry, that's not the time to eat, because your digestion will not be good. So it's always good to be able to come to the dining table in a good frame of mind. So look at this, it's called the second brain for a good reason. Research has revealed that antibiotics have the potential to disseminate your gut bacteria. That means that the round you took for your sinus infection could have cut your gut flora down to 1/10 of its previous level. Not by 1/10, but to 1/10. That's a 90% reduction. Let me put it another way. Someone has said that taking a round of antibiotics is like putting a nuclear bomb in your stomach. That's how devastating it is. And so very often when we take antibiotics, we're not told about the repercussions of what may happen. And so it's always good if you're taking antibiotics to make sure you're taking a good probiotic to replace the gut flora, because it is decimated by that round of antibiotics. And then you hear of people who take not just one round, but 2 rounds and 3 rounds of antibiotics, and you're doing untold damage to that gut microbiota. So very, very important that you take your probiotic. There are foods that you can be taking, fermented foods. Sauerkraut is one of those, miso, kombucha. There are so many things that you can be taking to make sure that you build that gut microbiota, which is so important to your mental health. Of course, the other thing that you can do for yourself, rather than taking the antibiotic, is to look for a natural antibiotic such as garlic. There's a product called Allicin where the garlic is a natural antibiotic. There are no side effects, and if you take them in the Allicin capsules. They are Allicin Max, really, really good, and you don't suffer with the side effects. So when we look at the factors that affect the microbiome, you look at the lifestyle, you look at your diet, antibiotics, hygiene, so these can result in hyperimmunity or immunodeficiency, depending on the choice that you make. So many factors have now been identified to affect the gut microbiome, as shown in figure 1, and an individual's genetics, the types of drugs or antibiotics they are taking, hygiene, physical activity, and other factors all play a role in maintaining, or if changed, altering the gut microbiome. So let's just talk a little bit about depression in the frontal lobe. The effects of lifestyle and nutrition on our frontal lobe are, in my opinion, ultimately more important than their effects on heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, kidney failure, and all the other degenerative diseases combined. We need to make it top priority to protect our brain because our quality of life originates there. And so I just want us to, this is from Dr. Neil Nedley, and I want us to just analyze this statement for a moment. The effects of lifestyle and nutrition on our frontal lobe are ultimately more important than their effects on heart disease. So here is what he's saying. The choices that you make, lifestyle choices that you make, may bring on heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, kidney failure, and other degenerative diseases. But he is saying that the most important thing to protect is your frontal lobe, because if the frontal lobe is intact, then you can make a wise decision not to pursue that unhealthy lifestyle that is going to result in kidney failure or cancer or heart disease or whatever it is. But if the frontal lobe is not functioning as it should, then your strength of will is not there. When you say, I am not going to eat fast foods anymore, for example, or I am going to exercise, you've got the strength of will to follow through on that decision because you've got good frontal lobe function. So the brain is the capital of the body, the seat of all the nervous forces and of mental action. The nerves proceeding from the brain control the body. By the brain nerves, mental impressions are conveyed to all the nerves of the body as by telegraph wires, and they control the vital action of every part of the system. All the organs of motion are governed by the communication they receive from the brain. Another place, Ellen White says that the brain is the capital of the body, and all the organs are subject to the brain. So this is a very crucial statement. The brain is in charge. I choose to put that food in my mouth. I'm the one who choose to eat the greasy spoon. I'm the one who choose to allow myself to eat all these various foods. I'm the one who choose to be eating constantly, thereby affecting not just my physical health, but my mental health. So the frontal lobe is the crown of the brain. That's where we have spirituality, morality, the will. So all of these are governed by the frontal lobe. And so diseases of the frontal lobe are mania, obsessive compulsive disorder, appetite increase, depression. And so this is why it's so important to look after that frontal lobe, because the frontal lobe is key to our decision making. So Let's have a look at some drugs that negatively impact frontal lobe. So we have anti-inflammatory NSAIDs. We have um, asthma medication, beta agonists. We have tranquilizers, painkillers, antihistamines, alcohol, nicotine, blood pressure medication, antidepressants, cold and allergy medications, sleeping tablets, caffeine, and this is from Dr. Nedley's book, Proof Positive. So let's just have a look at these for a moment and just think about the amount of people in the population who are operating on compromised frontal lobe because they're on asthma medication, or they're taking blood pressure medication, or sleeping tablets, or antidepressants. You see the list is there, and for many people this is our go-to. This is what we this is what we do. If you're suffering high blood pressure, I'll just take the high blood pressure medication. If I'm suffering pain, I just go for the tranquilizers. If I've got hay fever, I'm going to go for the antihistamines. Our politicians, I don't know how it is for your politicians where in the part of the world where you are, but I can tell you that in the United Kingdom, alcohol flows freely for our politicians, whether it's at night or during the day, and then they go into the lobbies to vote on our well-being. That's why we're in trouble, beloved. Because these guys are not operating at their optimal best, because caffeine suppresses the frontal lobe, nicotine suppresses the frontal lobe, alcohol suppresses the frontal lobe, and these are just the popular drugs that we know about. But what about if they're taking sleeping tablets, or they're on some kind of tranquilizer, or they're on medication for blood pressure? And so then you get all of these factors coming together. That means that you are not functioning at best, and yet you're going to vote about other people's well-being when your mental health is compromised. Lord help us. And then caffeine upsets the delicate balance of nerve transmission in the brain. So consequently, it is not surprising that caffeine is an agent that raises dopamine levels. It increases the risk of certain mental illnesses, even though it may appear harmless on the surface. And so what happens when you increase that pleasure hormone? Dopamine goes up. I need to have another Lucozade, or I need to have another one of these drinks, and all of these things are having an impact on our mental health. And then let's just look at the caffeine content: brewed coffee, filtered coffee. You can see all the milligrams in these different cups of coffee. And then we think that chocolate is safe, but look, the espresso is there. Then you've got your chocolate with 50 to 60 milligrams, green tea 36, decaffeinated coffee is still on the list with 8 mgs. So beloved, let us think about alternatives. What can we do to make sure that our frontal lobe is functioning at its best? It's to avoid these things. So some people cannot begin the day unless they start it with their cup of brew. Am I telling the truth? So many people know that that's the truth, and yet you'll begin the day with a compromised frontal lobe. Caffeine has been linked with anxiety, neurosis, psychosis, a state where a person loses touch with reality, schizophrenia, the so-called split personality disorder. Okay, so this is from Dr. Neil Nedley. Coffee has been implicated in increased dopamine levels in the brain. This is worrisome. Some of the most profound psychiatric diseases, such as schizophrenia, appear to be due in part due to excess dopamine. In fact, standard drug therapy for these serious mental disorders involves the use of dopamine blocking agents. And so we just need to be careful. This is what we're saying is that the our frontal lobe needs to be working at its optimal best, and that comes through making a decision about what goes into the body. So the two most common forms of malnutrition causing anxiety relate to a deficiency of some of the B vitamins and to the excessive consumption of processed and refined foods. This is Dr. Linus Pauling, and I just want to repeat that. He's saying that two most common forms of malnutrition causing anxiety. So this is nutrition and it's malnutrition that causes mental health problems, anxiety, is the lack of some of the B vitamins, and then the excessive consumption of processed and refined foods. Now, beloved, that is speaking to all of us, because when you go shopping and you're buying the refined cereals, you're buying the white flour, the white bread, you're buying processed meats, processed foods, and this goes for the vegetarian brand as well. So if you are eating the refined vegetarian foods, the processed vegetarian foods, then of course you are in that category as well. So it's so important that we think about holistic health, making your own foods, buying the raw ingredients where you've got all the nutrients, all the minerals, all the vitamins contained within the food, rather than going to a processed food diet. So look at Dr. Pauling talked about the anxiety, malnutrition causing anxiety relate to a deficiency of B vitamins and the excessive consumption of processed and refined foods. And then I just want to show you, let's have a look at some of the derivative for anxiety. Anxiety-related illnesses, social anxiety, we have phobias, we have panic disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so a better diet, a better health, we're not saying that if you were pursuing or if you were eating totally 100% all the things you should be eating, that you wouldn't suffer with any of these things. But I can assure you that you are reducing the risk greatly because your body is better able to cope. So all can be overcome through lifestyle changes. So constant stimulation of the senses shuts down the analytical processes of the mind and ultimately shuts down the ability to think and face life rationally. This leads to escape techniques and adaptive responses, which tend to involve withdrawal, apathy, and rejection of disciplined thinking when faced with difficult duties and decisions. And I just want you to have a look at this picture, because this is the modern family. Am I telling the truth, beloved? Look at Johnny on the left. He's got his laptop in front of him, plus he's got his iPhone and his phone there, and he's just zoned out. And we've got Rebecca on the right-hand side, and she's also got her laptop and a phone in her hand, and she's completely zoned out. And Dad is zombified, looking at the TV with the remote in his hand. That is not a picture of good family life, and yet it reflects a lot of what's going on today. Kids walk into the home and they've got they've got their headphones on. They're with their Facebook friends, or they're talking to their friends, or they're sending a text message, and we are totally disconnected from reality. We're disconnected from one another, and it's having a toll on our mental health. So human and other animal studies demonstrate that exercise targets many aspects of brain function and has broad effect on overall brain health. The benefits of exercise have been best defined for learning and memory protection from neurodegeneration and alleviation of depression, particularly in elderly populations. So the best thing that you can be doing for yourself is getting out there and going on a brisk walk. The use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many are not willing to give. Nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient, it seems slow. And so, what the spirit of prophecy is saying here is that the natural way, using nature's remedies, may be slow, and doc, just fix me up with a pill. I just need a tablet so that I can go back to work. I need to get over this thing quickly. But what she's saying is that we need to give nature a chance. Nature's processes of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient it seems slow. The surrender of hurtful indulgences requires sacrifice, but in the end it will be found that nature untrammeled does her work wisely and well. So making a decision to stop drinking caffeinated drinks, making a decision to stop using tea and coffee, you making a decision to stop eating processed foods will transform your life and also your mental health. Those who persevere in obedience to her laws will reap the reward of health of body and health of mind. So serotonin is key to brain health, especially those who are suffering from depression and anxiety disorders. And many of the drugs given to patients are to boost their serotonin levels. Serotonin is an essential fatty acid, and the body does not make it. And I covered this yesterday. So omega-3 fats are also essential to brain health and function. Tryptophan is an essential amino acid. Your body cannot produce it, so it must be supplied through diet. When you take in foods with tryptophan, the body converts tryptophan into serotonin. So foods containing tryptophan, such as pumpkin seeds, tofu, sesame seeds, demonstrate just how interrelated your gut and brain are. It is interesting to note that anxiety-related illnesses can often be related to a poor diet. Anxiety-related illnesses are, and we'll repeat them again, social anxiety, phobias, panic disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. All the foregoing disorders are psychiatric illnesses where one will invariably refer to a counselor or a psychiatrist. However, it is interesting to note that many of these disorders can be overcome by diet and lifestyle changes. And this is from my dissertation, a comparative study of Hippocrates' statement that all disease begins in the gut, and Ellen White's statement that 90% of all disease begins in the mind. So we have these selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and these medications gradually increase the amount of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain. This is what one of the medications that you would be given when you're suffering from depression and anxiety. But I want you to notice that you can get tryptophan from your food, and I've taken this little diagram from Dr. Neil Nedley's book, and just have a look at the content of tryptophan in foods. So whole milk is very small there at 46 milligrams per 100 grams, but you've got black-eyed cowpeas, black walnuts, almonds. I live on an almond farm where there is no shortage of almonds. I have far more almonds than I can use. You've got sesame seeds, 358 milligrams. And what you could do, if you're making your own hummus at home, then of course what we do is we grind up the sesame seeds for our tahini, and we put that in there. You've got a very, very healthy food there, and it's good brain food. Gluten flour, 510 milligrams. You've got roasted pumpkin seeds, 578, flax seeds, 644, tofu, way out in front, 747 milligrams. And so this is wonderful foods that you can be eating for your brain health. So plants containing omega-3 fats. You've got, I've covered some of these already, but you have avocados, strawberries, blueberries, turnips, banana, sweet potatoes, apples. So let's think about holistic living. So one things that we love to do, we want to curry up and we want to fry up and all these things, but and roast up. But remember that when you add heat to a lot of these things, you are compromising the nutritional benefit of the food. And just look at the flaxseed. Look how rich flax seeds are. 7,520 milligrams in 1 teaspoon, 1 tablespoon, all that omega-3 fatty acids, which is tremendous brain food. And one of the things that we do here is that we have a little coffee grinder. If you have a coffee grinder and you put your sesame seeds in and your flax seeds, and sometimes we mix the seeds, so we'll do a blend of seeds. Remember to always just do enough for your use at the time because of the process of oxidation. So just do enough flaxseed, sprinkle that on your cereal. You may want to put it in a smoothie, so you can have a powerhouse of a smoothie by just putting some flaxseed in there or some sesame seeds. And there's wonderful things that you can do for your brain health. Okay, so to be fair, I've included this image also of omega-3 fatty acids in fish, drumfish, 810, tuna packed in water, 930, and then you go down to Atlantic mackerel, 3,930. Now, let me just say this, beloved, there are no unpolluted waters on the planet. We live in a world where our seas are polluted, and so fish is one of the most polluted foods that you can be eating. And so why not go for the that which is safer? And look, not even the best fish can match the amount of omega-3 fatty acids that you're finding in a tablespoon of flax seeds. Remember, if you're considering any herb or medication as a means of alleviating mild to moderate depressive symptoms, lifestyle measure should always be your first option. When I read this, I was just blown away by what Dr. Neil Nedley is saying. And I'm going to read it again. If you are considering any herb or medication as a means of alleviating mild to moderate depressive symptoms, lifestyle measures should always be your first option. And so the flaxseed and the tryptophan, your pumpkin seeds, your lifestyle, going to bed early, so getting that circadian rhythm right, going to bed early at night, getting up early in the morning, going for your walk, drinking your water, getting out there in the sunshine. These things will do wonders for your mental health. And so what Nedley is saying, rather than reaching for that medicine cabinet and getting your antidepressants, why not try changing your lifestyle? And maybe you are one who is, your frontal lobe is seriously compromised already, and therefore you will need professional help to get you through that situation. But think about changing your diet and your lifestyle. Through the right exercise of the will, an entire change may be made in the life. By yielding up to the will of Christ, we ally ourselves with divine power. We receive strength from above to hold us steadfast. A pure and noble life, a life of victory over appetite and lust, is possible to everyone who will unite his weak, wavering human will to the omnipotent, unwavering will of God. From the book Ministry of Healing, page 176. So, Nedley says, in my opinion, the effects of lifestyle and nutrition on our frontal lobe are ultimately more important, and I've read this before, than the effects on heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, kidney failure, and all the other degenerative diseases combined. The brain deserves priority for protection when you realize that that is where our quality of life originates. And so, as I'm coming to the end, just remember that looking after brain health through lifestyle is more important, because that will also have an impact on other parts of the body. So folic acid or folate deficiency can be a direct cause of depression. I've found this to be a much more common cause of depression in meat eaters than in vegetarians. People with omega-3 deficiency seem to have similar depression rates, whether they are meat eaters or vegetarians. So look at your sources of folate. If you are eating a wide range, and this is why we're admonished to eat a wide range of foods with different colors and so on, because then you're getting all the various nutrients that you need. Chickpeas, black-eyed peas, lentils, red kidney beans, okra, navy beans, spinach, mustard seeds, Spanish peanuts, fresh orange juice, sirloin steak or broiled. Now, obviously, I'm not recommending the sirloin steak because I'm a vegan, I'm plant-based. However, as I go down this list, everything on there are things that I eat, except the okra pods. We can't get okra where I am here in Spain. I don't see it very often. Navy beans, we have similar. Mustard greens, we have a lot of greens. And so if you're eating a variety, a wide variety from the things that God has given to us, then you know that you will be in good health and you're guarding your mind. The human family have followed a course of disobedience and, like Eve, have been beguiled by Satan to disregard the prohibitions God has made, flattering themselves that the consequences would not be as fearful as had been apprehended. The human family have violated the laws of health and have run to excess in almost everything. Disease has been steadily increasing, and the cause has been followed by the effect. And so, beloved, as I close, just want to remind you that when we talk about nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, fresh air, rest, and trust in God, we're just not talking about your physical health, but this is real PPE for the mind, for mind health. If you're going to have good mind health, good brain health, then you need to take care of the physical. And that begins by making a decision in the mind. So in case of depression, always talk to a professional. Consider lifestyle factors as part of the recovery plan. Practice using the circadian rhythm and trust in divine healing. Trust in the divine healing providence of God. So just want to thank you, Sophie. That's the end of my presentation today. I'm sorry it was a bit long, but I hope you were able to be benefited from it.
I am sure we were all blessed by the presentation. Really good information, Pastor Sam. Thank you so much for that. I'm glad that you touched on a lot of issues that I believe a lot of us have questions about. You talked about, which is again very important, you talked about the nurses, those who care for us, because sometimes we can they can be ignored, their needs can be ignored because they look after us, so they should be fine. But obviously that's not the case. They see, I guess, a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, and that can affect their mental health as well, which is very important. I'm really glad that you talked about the cultured foods as well. I would like to know a little bit more about that, Pastor Sam, if you have more information on what the differences are, because we've heard, I guess, the other side of things. There are doctors who would not recommend anything that is made by fermentation. So, what is your take on that in terms of what the differences are between cultured foods and like wine or vinegar?
Sure. Um, well, I've got a yeast condition that I'm struggling with at the moment, and I'm using a lot of the cultured foods. So I'm using miso. This is good for the gut microbiota. Um, I'm using kombucha. I'm using sauerkraut. These are very, very good foods. Apple cider vinegar, another one good for the gut. So I know that the opinion out there varies, but I can only share with you where I am, and I'm saying these are good things to be using. Miso is good. We don't use butter, we don't use margarine, but we use miso. To put on your bread. We will mix that with avocado and other good stuff. So we are just using natural foods. I've just started. I've just bought myself a bottle of sauerkraut from your part of the world. So we're using that, and we would even like to be able to make it ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. It is very interesting, um, especially with whether you have seen benefits on yourself. Like, do you see immediate benefits when you use those cultured foods, or
Yes, so at the moment, we're just trying to get rid of the fungal problem, and if we are not feeding the fungus with sugar and using these cultured foods, then we're fighting the yeast infection. And so this is the way to go, and I would certainly recommend it. And there are many naturopathic doctors who recommend that as well.
mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you very much for that information. And you talked about grieving as well. Before I asked a question, I would encourage everyone to type your questions, and Pastor Sam will try to get to them again as time allows. But yeah, you talk about grieving as well, Pastor Sam. Is that a normal process? You said we don't volunteer to grieve, but is that a normal process, or the absence of it is normal?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think that grieving is a very natural process. It's normal. I would say if you don't grieve, you are abnormal. Because if there is a crisis in your life, if let's say your child died and you came out smiling, hi everyone, is just gone, that is abnormal. That's when I'd need to call the psychiatric doctor for you, because there's something wrong with this person. And I think you also alluded, Sosi, not here, but you talked about anger, and said, well, is anger normal? And if I came out and saw somebody scratching a nail down the side of my car, and I said, all right, mate, have a good day, that's abnormal. That's abnormal behavior. So God has given us these responses. These responses are what make us human. So anger is something that I need in order to navigate my way through life. The Bible is very careful and clear in saying, "Be angry and sin not." So just because I'm angry doesn't give me the right to go and smash up somebody's car or beat them up or whatever. But I can sit down. I'm so angry that I sit down and write a letter, or I phone the police or whatever. So we are the ones who control how we respond to anger. If somebody's damaging my car, I'll write up and say, walk up to them and say, what do you think you're doing? I want your name and address. I want your phone number, because I will be contacting the police, or I will be doing this. You've got to pay for this damage. If I ignore it and walk away, I'm not normal. And so grieving is similarly a natural response to a loss, and God has made us that way. And when we look in the Bible, in John chapter 11, it tells us Jesus wept. Because he was like us. And so that's a natural emotion that God has given to us. And I would say that we would be less than human if I did not have that natural emotion of grieving. And so we grieve the loss of a marriage, we grieve the loss of a loved one, we can grieve the loss of a job. These are the loss of a pet. I remember when my kids were growing up and the pet hamster died. They were very, very upset, and we had to do a funeral service in the back garden for them. So these are just natural things that normal emotions that God has given to us.
Yes, very interesting, especially about anger. That was the Bible verse I was about to ask you about, how we can be angry and not sin. Whether anger itself is a sin or what you do with that anger is,
Sure. Yeah,
will be.
yeah. No, anger can never be a sin. Anger is not a sin. It's what you do with the anger that becomes sinful. So if I allow my anger to cause me to start using swear words and to start fighting and so on, then of course I'm using that anger wrongly. But I can channel my anger in other ways in order to, because anger is a very important defense mechanism that God has given to us.
Mhm. I asked that question before as well to another presenter about anger, and what he was saying is that it's our expectations of how we should be treated. So it sounded more like we should not be angry at all, because we should not have those expectations as to how we should be treated. That's where it's coming from. And I know that anger affects our immunity as well. But like you said, like what we do with our anger, whether it makes us go to the police or do something about the situation, that's,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd rather go with the Bible Socian rather than and not the answer from that gentleman, because the Bible says, "Be angry, but don't sin." So make sure you control your anger. Make sure that it's direct. I remember when my daughter was at school. She must have been about 10 years old, and she came home. She was being bullied by a teacher, and because we'd been in the school and we'd spoken to the teachers, we thought that this was now at an end. And then she came home and told us what happened. And me and my wife, we were very angry, very angry. We went up to the school, spoke to the headmaster, and as a consequence of that, I also wrote a letter to the local authority with a complaint. So I didn't go up there effing and blinding or anything like that, but we took action because we were sufficiently angry. I didn't break any rules and so on, but we saw results as a result of taking those steps. So anger pushes you to do something about a situation, whereas if you weren't angry, you just sit back and say, "Oh, yeah, all right, you go back to school and have a good day tomorrow." we need to get angry. We really do.
true. Yeah, very good. Very logical. So the other question is about how do we convince someone to change their diet if you can see their brain is affected by their diet, but they themselves can't see that? So how can we tell the person that they need to change their diet?
I think that's a very, very difficult question to answer, because I'm in that situation. I've got family members that I want to help, desperately want to help, but and I've shared that information. But unless a person is in that place where they can, number one, maybe the frontal lobe is suppressed and they can't respond.
Mm,
Because you're saying, your lifestyle is leading you to further depression. Your lifestyle is not helping you, so you need to change and start doing this. And maybe sometimes I think, well, if the person was living with me, then I could help. But that doesn't help either, because what I've found is that we are human beings, And we want to do a lifestyle center here, and folk have come to the farm, and this is one of the negative things about where we are, is that they come to the farm, and we are teaching them a holistic lifestyle, and they drive down to the shop and they come back with crisps and sweets and donuts that they have in their room. So unless people are willing to embrace that
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle for themselves, there's nothing you can do for them. That frontal lobe has to kick in for them. You cannot do it for them.
Yes. I was talking to someone before about their lifestyle, how it's affecting how they think, and that person told me as well that I have to want it. And then I had the same thoughts. If only they were living with me, I would just not give them anything unhealthy and it would be good. But yeah,
No,
I
no, no.
guess,
They'd go and get it somewhere else.
yeah. So, what about, Pastor Sam, gluten-free diet? Because I have heard of cases where someone can have even inflammation in their brain because of the gluten. Obviously, that's a different issue, whether it's the gluten or um, what they are sprayed with, because we know that it's a bit contaminated.
Sure,
But
sure.
what information do you have about how gluten can affect our mental health?
So absolutely, the wheat that we have now is a hybridized wheat. So it's been genetically modified, and therefore the gut cannot absorb the gluten as well as it might. So gluten-free diet does aid the gut, and so I would recommend that, for that, if we can move away from your the wheat and the gluten, to using a form of grain that is not does not have a certain gluten, for example, or a different type of gluten. You may want to use felt flour. You can try some other kinds of flours, where the some other kind of grains. So at the moment, I'm using chickpea flour. So we're experimenting. You can try different kind of grain flours away from the wheat gluten, which is compromised, difficult to digest, compromises the gut microbiota, which, as we have seen in this presentation, does affect your brain health.
Yes, it's amazing because I was talking to someone about that, and they would talk about their experiences if they are on a diet that includes gluten or processed food, how they
Yes,
suffer with mental health issues, and when the diet changes. Because,
yes,
yeah, it's very interesting that how our brain responds to food.
absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so we talked about lifestyle changes, and you talked about exercise as well, Pastor Sam. What about mental exercises? Do you have any preferred methods of mental exercises like reading or learning by heart?
Sure. I think that's an excellent question. And for your brain health, because I'm in that in that position where my mother has dementia, and I have seen how she has been able to navigate her dementia and stay alert for much longer. You hear of people whose parents don't recognize them, and my mother has had the dementia now for over 9 years, so she's at the towards the back end of what is suggested as the length of time for dementia. Yet when I call her, she will recognize my voice. We can have a good conversation and so on. She may ask the same question over and over, but we can talk together. And what I've noticed about my mother's lifestyle is that every morning she gets up, she has her worship, she's in her Bible, she's in her quarterly. That keeps her mentally agile. So when I'm in the UK, I will sit down with her and we'll say, well, the scripture reading for today is Genesis chapter 1. and I will sit there and watch as she finds it. She has her hymnal. We're going to sing hymn number 510. She will find it. So all these mental exercises is what I know has really kept my mother going mentally. And so I'm in a position where I'm living in Spain. I'm learning a new language. That will also keep the brain active. You know, if you can be learning a new exercise, Sudoku is something that my wife loves to do. That gives you mental agility. So look at exercises. Doing a big puzzle will again engage the brain. So whatever you can do, um, the study of God's word, the study of another language, the pursuit of some form of study, whatever is going to keep the mind active will always be a positive for good brain health.
Yes, very good. I remember when I was 17 years old, my first attempt at entering uni failed, and I was very depressed because I was also under the impression that after a certain age, you're not able to retain information as well. And that's, I think, the mindset also where I am right now. That's the mindset in Armenia that after a certain age, like you will not see in universities people above a certain age, and then you go to different countries and then you see 70, 80-year-olds studying something new. So it just comes to show that it is possible. The brain is pliable and flexible.
Absolutely, 100%.
It's very good news, and it just tells us that we have no excuse. And I just remember as well that Dr. Clark was also talking about attitude. We were talking about it the other day, and he mentioned that when they had training, they were working with patients whose feet were sore. And after a week or so, he found that his feet were sore as well. And then his colleagues also reported the same type of thing, that because of just interacting with people that had sore feet, they got sore feet as well. So I find it very interesting that I guess what you believe might hurt you as well.
By beholding, you become changed.
Yeah. Yes, that's very good. Okay, so we are nearing the end of our time on the program. So we want to thank you very much, Pastor Sam, for the time dedicated to us. And we would like to close with a word of prayer. And I'll offer a word of prayer.
Sure. Thank you, Sophie. It's been my pleasure to be with you on this platform yesterday and today. And thank you for the invitation. God bless you.
Bless you too, Pastor Sam. Thank you. Okay, let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for our time together. Thank you for the wonderful information that you have allowed Pastor Sam, Dr. Sam, to share with us. And thank you that you have your messengers on earth that can share the information that you have given us, and that you have given us the foods and the lifestyle choices that we can implement to look after our health and to look after our minds especially. We thank you for all opportunities, and we ask all of these in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. You too, Pastor Sam. See you next time.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our presentation today as well. We would like to remind you that you can subscribe, you can share, and You can support our ministry by sharing, liking, and also donating if you wish to. You can also contact Pastor Sam or Dr. Sam with the information that was provided at the beginning of the presentation. We are looking forward to seeing everyone next week, next Friday, 8 p.m. Australia Brisbane time, 2 p.m. is in a few places in Europe, Armenia, Dubai, Spain is 12 p.m. So we would like to encourage everyone to join us again next week. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.